All right, well, I'm going to get us started. I know we're expecting a few more people, but welcome. My name is Margie Dorhorst. I'm a consulting teacher and a curriculum instructional designer, both part-time for the Center for Responsive Schools, and you're participating in a webinar today called Engaging and Empowering Students in a Socially Distanced and Virtual Classroom. Can't thank you enough for taking these 90 minutes out of your day to join in with other educators and to join me in discussing this really powerful topic. And I know for many of you, this was a learning day already for you. You already probably had students in front of you, so extending your day. And whatever role you're in, I just really appreciate all of you being here. My background as an educator, I was a speech and language pathologist. I was also a gifted and talented instructor and spent the last 16 years of my career with public school education as a principal in an elementary school that implemented responsive classroom school-wide. So I come to this work with that experience and also am excited to share with you how we can use these same approaches that we've had a chance to use, or I've had a chance to use, in this now challenging situation that we have with the requirements that we have to keep kids safe. If you're joining me and this is your first time learning about responsive classroom, that's okay, this is for you. And if you have a lot of background in responsive classroom, this is for you also. To get us started, I'm just gonna stop share for a moment and get a chance to see everybody, go quickly through how we're gonna use Zoom. If you look at this big screen down on the left, you have the mute button for all of you that looks like a red microphone. For you when you join into a breakout room, because we're going to do 2 breakouts, make sure you click on that so that you can be heard by your group. The next one is the stop video. And for some of us, it helps if we stop video when we're in a bigger group, just to save on bandwidth or if there's something else going on in the background. But just like in a class, it's great to see all of you. So if you have a chance to share your video, I really appreciate that as well. When you're in breakouts, it's going to be really helpful if you to click on that so you can share video and also be unmuted so you can share. A couple buttons over is the chat button, that little speech bubble. Today, just to help us get a chance to know each other, in the chat right now, if you click on that, you'll see where you can click and type to everyone in the group where it says to everyone. Let us know what position you have and where you're joining us from, so we can get a chance to see who's in our group, where you're from, and what your role is in your school. And you'll get a chance to see that chat grow so we have an idea of who's joining us. So a nice variety. It looks like we're hitting a lot of the country. A lot of you more on the East Coast area. Bolingbrook, Illinois, had experience being there. And a number of you, I can see based on your teaching roles that many of you probably were just with students. So glad you're all here. The topic today is engaging, empowering students. And one of the ways we do that, and one of the most powerful ways, is getting to know our students. It's harder to do in a 90-minute webinar, but we're going to have some opportunity to do that in the work that we do today. So not only are you going to be learning about how to engage and empower students in the unique situation we're in right now, but you're also going to get a chance to practice some of the practices that we use while we're in this 90-minute webinar. If you've taken any of our workshops in responsive classroom in the past, you'll realize that a lot of the work we do mimics the work that we expect students to do in the classroom, because truthfully, it's good pedagogy and it's important for us to practice those skills that we know are important for learning with adults as well. As you're joining us, these are the goals for today's webinar. So in the next 90 minutes, these are the things that we're going to be focused on. And I want you to take a moment just to think about these goals and a goal that you're hoping to walk away from in the next 90 minutes. What's going to be helpful for you? Take a moment to read the goals. One of the ways we engage and empower students is we start the year kind of letting them know what the school year is going to be about. We start each day with the goals for learning. We start our learning periods with what we're hoping students are going to learn for the day, the learning objectives. But to make it more powerful and engaging for students, we want them to connect with what's in it for them. So just like you right now, what's in it for you? What are you hoping to achieve by being in this webinar today? We do that with students to engage them as well. So what does that look like? These are some of the things we're going to talk about today in our webinar as we talk about the challenges that we're approaching and then how we can use our approaches in responsive classroom to address them. So one of the things we know about learning is that students, to be successful in learning, need to be engaged. Okay, so now we've got this crazy pandemic that we have no control over and students have no control over that's required us to have different models of learning that probably we haven't used before, possibly, or our students haven't experienced. So we've got the requirements for the coronavirus, and then we also realize that it's kind of open bare the concerns about equity. And as we see those changes and the challenges that students have, we need to address both of those in order for us to have a truly engaging learning opportunity for our students. We're going to anchor that based on the characteristics of engaging academics from the responsive classroom approach. And then we're going to look at those engaging practices through the lens of the requirements for COVID-19 and also through that lens of equity. One of the ways we're going to get started with this work is practice a strategy that we use in responsive classroom to help us to be engaged in our learning. It's a strategy called an interactive learning structure. Now, learning the responsive classroom approach, there's a number of different practices or strategies we use. This interactive learning structure is called a circle map. So you may have heard of a circle map before. So to start out with, you need that piece of paper that I talked to you about having before. And on that piece of paper, you're going to draw a circle. Hopefully you can see that. You can see my little snapshot of me. In the middle of the circle, you're going to write the topic that we're going to be learning about today, and that's engaging academics. So you might have seen I wrote that rather large. Within the circle, you're going to jot down ideas that we discuss and we talk about that go along with the topic of engaging academics today. So as we talk about something, you might jot down a word that resonates with you, or maybe it's a practice you're already doing or a question that you have. So it's kind of random and not really organized. If I was doing this in person, we probably have a big chart paper and each table would have a chart paper. Obviously, when we're being socially distanced, we might be standing around that paper, but we would be socially distanced. I'm showing you how you could do this virtually. Some people use virtual tools when they're doing a circle map. I'm just using a paper and pencil so that we can all have that. The last thing we're going to do with our circle map is we're going to use a strategy called categorization. So we're going to categorize the ideas in our circle map for the purpose of connecting with others. So let's get ready to add to our map. So the first one we talk about engagement is we're going to talk about that impact that we've seen that's happened with engagement. And when we realize that that's caused with some of the social distancing and the virtual models that we've had to use or the hybrid models, it's caused teachers to really question some of the approaches that they may have used to keep students highly engaged. Maybe the workshop models that you've been trying in the past are not as easy for you to use right now with students because of the social distancing or because of the need to be have a virtual approach. Maybe the small group learning that you've been successful with has been a challenge. And I've heard teachers then say they've had to lean more on doing more paper pencil work and going back to approaches that they've kind of moved away from in the past. Also, because of the pandemic and the changes we've had to make, it's had an impact on equity. Some of our students are joining us with not having the same experiences in those 3 months when they've been on their own that other students have had, where they've had more of a rich learning experience. Some kids didn't have the same access to technology or even to people at home to support them. And that might be going on right now. So depending upon the approach that we're doing, we might have students who are struggling with the impact that COVID has had on their families or on their home life or on their ability to be able to connect with technology if that's our delivery model. And when we have that impact of equity on our students, it also impacts their engagement. Sometimes it forces us to take a look at our delivery model again. And I've seen some teachers say, well, those kids are getting and whatever those kids might be, but those kids are having to have these paper pencil packets because that's all they have accessible to them at home. I'm trying my best, but that's what they're able to do. And when we know that we're not able to meet the needs of all kids. And then that lives on our heart and becomes another challenge. As we work through the challenges that we're dealing with right now, I think one of the things that's important for us is to recognize and label those challenges. To say, yes, these are the challenges we're struggling with, and recognize them and make an action plan to address them. And then also look at the uniqueness that we're in right now as some potential for some opportunities. One of the opportunities I've heard teachers say is that, getting my kids on technology a lot more than what I would have before. Boy, my kids are coming into my classes having had a lot of experience with technology. Or, wow, my kids have been home with older brothers and sisters who they've been watching them do their work, and they're picking up some different strategies that I haven't even taught them yet because of that. Or maybe another opportunity is they're so excited to be in person again that even though we have socially distanced learning, they're just trying their very best to make it successful. And another opportunity has been where, because the whole world is experiencing this pandemic at the same time, we're kind of living history. So as students are living and realizing how their actions can impact others, we can use that to have them be a little bit more aware of other times when their actions can impact others. Just like we're wearing masks to keep everybody safe right now. What's something else we can do to be safe and help everyone else? I guess it's kind of abstract, but it's meaningful as we think about that. So take that time to think of those opportunities. Now, this is where, as we talk about these things, maybe I jotted something or said something that you want, like, oh, that's something I just kind of triggered something in my mind to remember. Add it to your circle map. So if there's something that I've shared and you say, oh, yeah, hadn't thought about that, add it to your circle map. Another part of responsive classroom is the importance of a true, as having a true core belief system that connects the work that we do. We're truly coming to me because we talk about it being the true north. When you're trying to know where you're headed, you need to know what's pulling you there and what's drawing you there. And the responsive classroom approach, it's this core belief statement that in order for students to be successful, both in school and out of school, they need a set of social emotional competencies and academic competencies. This belief system literally connects everything that we do. And it's not just a belief that we say students have to have these competencies. We believe it's our role and our responsibility to assure all students are taught these competencies. And it's every adult that works with the student's responsibility. I'm going to talk about them briefly, and then I want to think about how they impact engaging academics as well. The 5 social emotional competencies make an acronym that is easy for me to remember: CARES. Students need to learn cooperation, assertiveness, responsibility, empathy, and self-control. Sometimes it's those competencies that get in the way of engaging learning and engaging academics. So rather than waiting for students to fail with one of those competencies in the responsive classroom approach, we take the time to teach those competencies to every child every day. We do that through our responsive classroom morning meeting. We do it through our responsive classroom advisory meeting for middle school. And we do it in our conversations that we work with students. So for example, if I'm doing a project later on in the afternoon that's going to require cooperation, and I think, I'm expecting all these students to cooperate, to work together to create this project, and I know some of the kids are going to struggle. In the morning, when I'm doing my morning meeting, I'm going to connect that through having them do an activity together where they're going to cooperate. In our morning meeting, we'll have an activity time where we do sharing. And in that sharing time, we're going to cooperate together to think of one new thing we can do at recess today that would be still safely socially distanced. So in your group of 3, talk together. What are some things we can do at recess that would be safe for us to do socially distanced? Each group shares. I can talk about, you all cooperated. One of the things I noticed is that you were all sharing ideas. You were asking others what they thought. You kind of disagreed politely with each other if you didn't think that was the best idea. And guess what? That cooperation skill that I just talked about We're going to use that this afternoon when we're in our science project, where we're all going to have to figure out how to make a model of a life cycle. So those same strategies you use now, we're thinking about recess time, we're going to use when we get together this afternoon in science class. In all 5 of these competencies, it's not like the social skill of the week. It literally is something that we infuse in every day. And we connect it to that social emotional skill connected to those academics. The 4 academic competencies are in addition to, when we think about where educational facilities, we're focused on academic achievement. But for many of our students, what becomes that challenge for academic achievement is literally having that academic mindset, or having perseverance, or a learning strategy, or academic behavior. I feel like these 4 competencies have kind of been exposed in a way, I guess, during the pandemic. So for some students, where it comes to having an academic mindset, I see myself being successful in school. I see that this is a type of learning I can do. Some kids literally have not been seeing themselves as being successful in school, traditional school, but it's been magnified for many of them during this time. Or that ability to persevere. If we're expecting students to be successful with some remote learning, and we know that many times with remote learning, they may not have all the supports that they need to be successful. What can you do to persevere, to push yourself through the challenges that you're having? Learning strategies. So think about our students that are at home that may not have all the tools they need. So maybe one of the tools they don't have is a ruler, when a ruler is needed for one of the math activities they're going to do. What's a strategy you can do to problem solve that? What else could you use besides a ruler to do that measuring? And same thing with academic behavior. I think I've heard teachers, a lot of them saying, part of my frustration is just having kids show up and be prepared for virtual learning, if that's my model for instruction. We can teach them, have empathy with students, and then teach them the importance of those skills. And we do that on a daily positive basis. This is how we address equity in our work, is that we expect all students to learn those skills, and we expect it's our responsibility to teach all the students those skills. And when they struggle with something, we look to these competencies. What strategies are you missing? All right, take a moment to add to that circle map thoughts that you have. Are there some roadblocks that maybe have been in the way for you with engaging academics? Is it one of these 9 skills that you see listed in front of you, or all of them? The next slide I'm going to show you is really the vision of this work. So in the responsive classroom approach, our goal is to have inclusive and equitable learning environments, no matter what the environment. If the environment is this screen in your home, if the environment is that hybrid model that's just been a challenge, or that asynchronous model, which is another challenge, or in-person and virtual, in-person and socially distanced. We do that by focusing on those core beliefs and teaching those competencies with the intention of our learning being diverse, equitable, and inclusive. That's the vision of the work that we're doing together. That's the way that in the responsive classroom approach, we create and design learning opportunities for students. If this is the what, the how that we get there, we call the 4 domains of the responsive classroom approach. One of the hows is by having effective management. And some of our webinars have talked about that. There's one next week, we're going to talk about the rulemaking process and the importance of that. Interactive modeling was talked about last week. We also talk about the importance of creating a positive community. So creating that positive culture in your school for learning. And we always do that through the lens of being developmentally responsive. But that vision of success has a strong vision for engaging academics. So I want you just to pause for just a moment, and I want you to envision down the road, maybe January, December, March, wherever you want to look ahead. And if you were looking into your classroom through that bird's eye view, what would it look like if students are highly engaged in your classroom? What would you see students doing? So as you create that vision, we're now going to talk about the how of responsive classroom. How do we get to that place where we see those students highly engaged, no matter what the model, if it's virtual or if it's in person? The responsive classroom approach has three key categories of engaging academics. I'm going to talk about each of these categories, and as we talk about them, we're going to engage in using that circle map and some interactive learning structures to help build that engagement and connection with this approach. So one of the hows is that engaging academics in responsive classroom approach is pedagogically sound. What does that mean? It means a couple of different things. It follows a natural learning cycle, and it's active and interactive. I'm going to walk through an example of engaging academics for you as I share this information. And I want you to think of examples for yourself of what might be examples in your mind. When I was a speech and language therapist, I was a co-teacher in a fourth grade classroom. I'm in central Wisconsin, and one of the things that was part of that curriculum was for students to learn about landforms. And one of the exciting things is kids looked forward every year to creating the salt map of Wisconsin and showed all the different landforms. And as I started thinking about that and working with the teacher that I worked with, we said, you know what? They care more about how to make a salt map, seems to be the big learning, than they really do about how our state has been formed and how the impact of the history of our state has been impacted on what they learn. So how can we use some of these ideas that go along with responsive classroom? Because we both were highly involved in responsive classroom. So as we talk about the importance of learning, we realized that our learning wasn't really following the natural learning cycle. I'm going to share this example with you, but I also want you to think about how to do it in the model that you're in right now too. So one of the things with following the natural learning cycle, we thought we need to have students invested in some problem solving with this. So have a clear goal for learning. We want them to be involved in helping articulate that goal, and then to do some experimentation and some planning and doing some understanding on their own, and then to do some reflecting as they did that as well. So we had them question some things about landforms. We talked about a little bit about what landforms were so they could think about it, but thought, well, what questions do you have? So they started asking questions about, well, why is there a river that runs through our city? And why is it the river that's in our city look different when we go in other places of the state? Why is there a mountain that's a little ways from us that we can go to for sledding and skiing, but outside there's really no mountains to go on? So they started really talking about the place that we lived and try to do that as well. Well, what can we do? How can we find out about that? And as we did that, we saw the students immediately becoming more engaged. Another thing we did is said the students needed to be active in the learning and they needed to have some time to interact. So we couldn't come up with all the topics and questions, but as they started brainstorming some questions, we said, okay, how many of you want to work on this question? And how many on that question? So we had them being in pairs. So they were fourth graders. They couldn't really, at that time, handle more than pairs, but they were working with pairs together. So they were having some interactive learning. And then as they were becoming more active in the learning, they did some digging into some of the resources. And as they're trying to figure out why things flow, they were doing some experimenting with things that they had. So immediately we started seeing students becoming more engaged. And it wasn't just all about the SALT map. Strategies to help you in this approach, no matter what your delivery model might be right now, are to think of ways to have learning at any time be active and at any time be interactive. You're going to practice today in some interactive structures called interactive learning structures. And it's harder when we have to be socially distanced or we have to be virtual, but you're going to see how we can use the tools of the Zoom platform to do partner sharing, to do small group breakouts, to use that circle map, to do a swap meet, to do a think, pair, share. We also can use strategies to be more active. One of the things we know, they say, you get the Zoom face where you're always just sitting in front of a computer. How can we get kids up and moving? You're going to learn about energizers and brain breaks, ways to get kids moving. We can have learning practices. Maybe one of the choices for showing their landform is to act out how a landform was formed. So getting ideas to getting them moving and talking with each other. Take a moment right now to just jot some ideas into the work that you have right now with your circle map, ways to make learning more engaging. We're now going to use an interactive learning structure called a one-word around. One word around, if it's done in person, is literally that. You ask a question and around the room, every student would say one word or one short phrase around. So ways to hear a pattern is it's a way to hear some different ideas. For a virtual one word around a day, you're going to use that chat feature again. So go into the chat, into everyone. You're going to answer the question that's there. What's one way that you plan to make learning more active or interactive? And hopefully you can see everybody else's chat too. I see a lot of people saying movement and breakouts, energizers, working in partnerships, trying to use online games for students, and getting kids involved in questioning. So ways to get them involved. It's funny because I've been hearing from a number of teachers saying, I've started the year just doing so many energizers, just the kids moving. And during that time, when you do those movement energizers, that's a great time also to teach those social emotional competencies. So I might use this one and say, one of the things I noticed is we were all responsible for adding our word into the chat. When we're all responsible, we could see those ideas grow. And I noticed that some people maybe had the same words when they're doing one word around. Just like when we do sharing, that shows that many of you might have some of the same ideas or same activities. One word around is another interactive learning structure that you can build into your repertoire of engaging academic strategies. So one characteristic of engaging academics was a pedagogically sound. Another is that learning is purposeful and challenging. These are some of the ways that we make learning purposeful and challenging. First of all, we make sure that we have clear objectives. And our clear objectives aren't just what we write on the board or put on the screen to show kids that we're connected to that outcome. But we get kids to put it in their language. What's in it for them? And throughout the lesson, we also want them to generate those same ideas, not just wait to the very end. And when kids can see what's in it for them and make those connections, they're much more engaged throughout. So one of the ways that our students started getting connected to this is they started thinking about what is the impact that landforms have on the different cities in Wisconsin. So as they're learning about our state, one of the things they're noticing is that many of the big cities in Wisconsin were located either on a river or on a lake. So why, when people were creating and building our state, why did they build the cities on rivers and lakes? That was one of the goals that they ended up having to explore, the importance of rivers and lakes in Wisconsin. Another way is to make sure it's appropriately challenging and that we're setting high expectations. Getting that just right learning can be a challenge. We know that zone of proximal development, the not too hard, not too easy, can be a challenge. One of the ways we get there sometimes is by giving choices. But I'd say whenever you can, hold up to those higher expectations. When we can help children see and help our students see that higher use of learning and have that application level of thinking and that evaluation level of thinking, we know that we're going to have higher engagement. One of the ways we did that was have students not only work on these projects together, but gave them the opportunity to teach others. So not everybody was exploring the same question. So their strategy was then, as you try to figure out the answers to these questions, your job is going to be to teach the other students who are answering a different question. So a way to just challenge them to that higher level. And another way for it to be purposeful and challenging is to Use effective questioning techniques. If you think of a quality lesson has that opening, body, and closing. When we can put open-ended questions at all three parts of that lesson, we engage kids into thinking right away. Opening, a lot of times our open-ended question might be connected to that clear objective. Or it might be connected to getting them to think about what is it they already know. And the body might be that time where we're having them do that higher level thinking and connect with what they know. The closing is where we kind of wrap it together. We look back and what is that learning and how are we going to use that learning that we just came up with. And when we ask those open-ended questions, especially in the different formats we have, sometimes it's hard because we can't get everybody's voice in the screen, or we can't have everybody being heard in our socially distanced classroom. So you can have different ways of responding. You can have verbal responding, have kids raise their hand and hear the responses. You can have partner shares. You can have written responses. You can have nonverbal responses. And just have that time and that quiet time for reflecting. All right, jot down some ideas again to your circle map, thoughts that you have to add to the ideas that we just were talking about. Another way we engage students in learning in the responsive classroom approach is with energizers and brain breaks. Energizers is what we call those movement activities for elementary, and brain breaks is what we call them for the middle school level. Switch is one of the ones that we teach. And I'm going to show you how we could use Switch as a brain break to help us, because we're 30 minutes into a webinar and we're sitting, and also how we can use it to connect with kids and to help them be engaged. So I'm going to model how I would use this with students, and then you'll see the directions that are there. One of the things I'm going to tell you right now is after this webinar, you're going to get a copy of the webinar. You're going to get the recording of it. You're also going to get all of the interactive learning structures and all of the energizers and brain breaks that we're doing today written in a document that is both for social distance learning and for virtual learning. So you have both options. I'm going to model this for you just so you can see how it would work with students. And I'm going to do this with stop share so you can see. So with students, I might say, we've been working a lot right now on our landforms and we've been doing some amazing thinking. We're going to stop for a minute and just pause. We're going to pause and do an activity that's going to help our brains just to get refreshed and help us all together. This activity is called switch. When we do switch, you're going to be operating both sides of your brain to operate your hands and part of your body. I'm going to show you what it looks like, and then you're going to give it a try. So on one hand, put up a thumb, and the other hand, put out a pointer finger. So do that part right now. And then when I say switch, you're going to put a thumb up with your other hand and point, but you're going to do it quickly. All right, you're ready? You're just going to switch. 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 So it looks like it should be easy, right? But as you do it, it gets to be a little harder. Try doing it now with your eyes closed. Thumb up, point your finger out. Try again. Switch. 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 Sometimes that can be easier. So with kids, it's a great way to just stop in the middle and say, pause. Now, what I might tell students at this point and say, what I noticed, you're all being responsible and trying, even though I saw for some of you it was a struggle. And when you had a struggle, saw a lot of you just smiling and still trying it again, and just kept going and looking at other people to see how they were doing it. As you're doing your learning right now, you might be hitting that point where things are a struggle. So think about switch, how you persevered and you kept going even though it was hard for you to do. Now, the fun part about switch is not just doing the thumbs and the fingers, but you can add some different movements to it, and students like giving their ideas as well. So sometimes you could switch and have a student be the person who calls out. Another idea is you could try doing it with People have done it different ways with their hands, like move one hand up, move one hand sideways. And now, oh, it's really hard, but you could do that and switch. Now switch. People have tried doing it with their feet or their legs or their arms, just different ways that they can move and do it where they're switching. So there's different movements you can try to have an idea that you're doing different things. And literally, it sounds goofy. There's not a lot of movement to it, but it refreshes your brain and gets you thinking and ready for some more learning. A third characteristic of engaging academics, and this is the last one, is that not only should it be purposeful, challenging, and pedagogically sound, but it should be student focused. And it seems like a given, but it's not always easy. And I think sometimes it becomes even harder as the models that we have right now are just taking so much of our thinking time. But anytime you can connect with students' strengths and interests, you're going to increase that level of engagement. One of the ways we did that with our community is just built this skate park and is also building this water park. And they were asking our students for their input as to the design of each of these. And one of the things they were telling us, literally, was that they're trying to have the design mimic the community. So what is it about the skate park that maybe looks like our community and our state? So they started talking about the hills and the bowl. Well, what landform does that look like? Or what is this that they're building in our water park that makes it look like the river? And why are they doing that? So taking what kids are interested in and then connecting it to that learning is going to help. But you have to get to know the kids first, to know their interests and to know their strengths. And that becomes a real important part of how we do responsive classroom with the morning meeting. And we do it with responsive advisory. I know in some of the models we're doing, that's been a little bit harder to do, but I say taking that time to really get to know your students is going to be really powerful. Student-focused learning also gives kids choice and autonomy. Anytime you can give just a small choice, you're going to increase the level of engagement. I know many teachers have said right now they have to do a lot of packet learning. Whether it's to keep them busy on the days they're not in school, if they're doing one of those hybrid models, or if it's while they're in school to keep them socially distanced or virtual. Giving them some choices for the packet learning. You need to do 3 of the 5 pages. You pick which 3 are going to help you most in learning and reflect on how those 3 helped you. So a small choice, but it gives them a level of choice. You have a choice of doing your packet in pencil or pen. It sounds goofy, but just as that simple choice gives them that ability to be involved. When we were giving choices in our project, we're giving choices for presenting. And we realized you can't give all the choices in the world, and whatever choices we gave them for presenting, they needed to be successful with. They were just learning how to do PowerPoints in their tech class. So we gave them the choice of doing a PowerPoint, or they could do acting out. So they could act out how their landform was created and why it was important. So for 4th graders, doing a verbal presentation wasn't going to bring them in. But the fact that they're working with a partner, they had a chance to kind of add some actions to it, which kind of met their 9 and 10-year-old learning style, I guess. And the last thing is we give them high quality feedback. Knowing what the clear expectation is going to be really helpful for that high quality feedback. Depending upon what you're doing, having a rubric for the work that you're doing can be really helpful. What is the level of learning that we're aiming for? And then I can use my feedback throughout the learning to give them feedback on how they're doing toward that learning. Or I can have them do some reflecting or even some partner sharing. What's something that you're noticing? These are the expectations we set in our rubric for learning. What are some expectations that you're noticing that your partner is doing? This is also a time where you can connect those academic competencies and those social emotional competencies. Remember, we've been working on cooperation, and I've been working with a partner on our project right now. What's some feedback that we can say about our group and how we've been cooperating to work together on this? What are some things that we've been noticing? And that's also empowering for students because it gives them that ability to notice as well. pause and jot down some ideas again. Add to your circle map. And now you're going to do the next level of thinking with your circle map. So with the circle map, you're now going to look at the words that you have written, the words, the phrases that you're in there, and you're going to categorize them. This is for you. So you're going to look at the words that you've added and create some type of coding system to show words that go together. If I, was having fun, I had colored markers, I might circle ideas together all with blue or circle some with pink, whatever colors would be standing out for me. And then I'd say, oh, the blue ideas are all ones to help me more purposeful with learning. Or the pink ones are going to help me to be more focused on goal setting. As you look for that category, I want you to be prepared to share one category and a couple of ideas that are within the category. To help you think about that, I'm going to show you this slide. So this is the content that we just talked about. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes right now to take a look at your map and look for those categories so that you can circle or highlight and then create a key so you know what the categories are. All right, as you finish up right now, you're going to pick a category. So one category that you highlighted and 2 to 3 ideas that you have to make learning more engaging. You're now going to use this interactive learning structure, which is called a swap meet. In a virtual swap meet, you're going to be in a breakout room with one other person. And when you get in the breakout room, do a real quick introduction and then share that category and 2 or 3 ideas. The challenge that can be when you get into a breakout room, when you don't know the person you're meeting, that you're greeting with, is that person who goes first. So I'm going to encourage you when you get to the group, if you're not sure who should go first, whoever's name comes first in the alphabet, your first name, because that's what most people's names start with. If you do get to a breakout room and that person isn't there or haven't joined in, just stay there for a moment. I'm going to do some rearranging, or you can come back into the big group and I'll be there. Now, this is how a swap meet works. So in your swap meet, each of you will have about a minute to share. So I'd say, my name is Margie Dohorst. I'm a consulting teacher for a responsive classroom. My category is this, and these are my 2 or 3 ideas. What's your idea? Share what their idea is. And then you're going to see the time is going to click down. Each breakout room is open for 2 minutes and then an additional 15-second countdown. After that 2 minutes is up, it's going to say, leave the breakout room. At that time, you can say, thank you, and close your meeting and come back out. You're going to meet in 2 more swap meets. So you'll be in a total of 3 swap meets to hear categories and ideas from that many different people. So you'll be talking about 3 different people. One of the things as you talk, if in there you get a chance to even say what your model is that you're going to be doing, whether it's virtual or whether it's socially distanced, that can help too as you get talking about engaging academics. This one, I will tell you, the frustration becomes it's just a short amount of time, but that's also the power of it. It's a quick activity for you to get to talk to a number of different people. If you have any questions right now, just unmute and ask them.
Margie, quick question.
Yes.
So when you're doing this with students, just a technical question, how do you reshuffle the breakout rooms? Is that how you do it?
Yep, I reshuffled on my end.
Okay, all right.
So when you come back in, you'll be reshuffled.
Okay, so they go into breakout rooms at a certain point while people are in breakout rooms, you're reshuffling them and then you switch. Is that how it works? Okay.
Yep. So get a feel what it feels like, and then I can explain to you on my end what I'm doing.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. Thanks for asking that, though. All right. Any other questions before we go into breakout rooms? One other reminder, make sure you turn your video on and unmute so that your speaker's on so that you can talk right away. Otherwise, that becomes the other thing. All right. First swap meet. Share your category and 2 or 3 ideas. Make sure you introduce yourself. Go. All right, welcome back, everybody. Look at our big bunch we have. So that was an interactive learning structure that you can do in person or you can do virtually. So you got a chance to see what it was like virtually. I'm going to show you again the slide that I have. You're going to get a copy of this and how you could do it in person and also how you could do it virtually. But when we're doing it socially distanced for a swap meet, in that case, you might have that they have to have that spacing and have a little bit more direction. There's different ways that you can do it, but keeping that same safety. And this is a time where you can talk about using those same strategies that you have for, I'm sorry, left my mind for a minute. Social emotional competencies and also those academic competencies. How did you persevere when you got into a place in your group that you had some strategies that the technology maybe wasn't working for you? How did you use empathy if you noticed somebody forgot to unmute or do their muting? So ways that you can make that connection through the interactive learning structure. These are the 3 interactive learning structures you've done, and you've been in this webinar for an hour. Circle map, one word around, and swap meet. The resources for these are all already in print. Joyful Classroom is for elementary, middle school motivators is for middle school. Responsive Classroom for music, art, PE, and other special areas also has a number of these that can be appropriate for those shorter specialist classroom times. And interactive learning structures has that ability to do a couple of different things. One, to be more engaging, but also to provide that equity, because during that time, not only are we teaching students those skills like I talked about before, the social emotional competencies and the academic competencies, we're giving them practice with them in a safe place. So right now you're going to get a chance to have a little bit longer discussion. It's not going to be that quick 5 minutes in or 2 minutes in and 2 minutes out. I want you to think about how you might use just the strategy of interactive learning structures in the role that you have to engage all of the students that you work with in a higher level of learning. And then based on the delivery model that you're using, how might you have to adjust that? Whether it's virtual, hybrid, or that social distancing need for that safety and equity. This is going to be a breakout room of 3 for a total of 5 minutes. Start again with that introduction. And just to make it easier, I'm going to say the person whose first name is the shortest gets to go first. And as you share your position, but then also share your role and how it's been impacted by this. So whether, you know, if I was a speech and language therapist, how I would be doing that now in COVID. And then also how interactive learning structures might engage all students. This one is not necessarily a swap meet, so you can just engage in that discussion. How might these practices be useful for you? Right, think about that question. I'll enter that question into the message so you'll get it during the breakout room. And you also, in a breakout room, have the ability to visit different groups. So you'll see that I'll try to show up in a couple of yours and just be there as a passive listener, not necessarily an active participant in your group. For this.
Hi, I'm so sorry. My internet is being a disaster.
That's okay. I can relate to that. I live in Wisconsin where we have really bad internet, so I can relate. Elizabeth, where do you teach?
I teach at the Sheffa School in New York City.
Oh my goodness. So what model are you guys doing right now?
We are fully back in school right now. We are in pods. Our school has the ability to be in very small classes. So we've been very lucky in that regard. Specialists are zooming in, which is why the internet troubles have been very frustrating. But everyone's been so patient and so great about it. But it's day 2. Everyone's still here.
Oh my goodness. What do you teach?
I teach 2nd and 3rd grade. It's a combined class.
So what kind of school is it, you said?
It is for children with language-based learning disabilities.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So everything is small group instruction. The pods are all, I have a particularly small pod. I have 8 students and a co-teacher. A lot of the pods are closer to 10 students with 3 teachers, but
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's
That's
very
gotta be
unique.
interesting. Oh, I bet. How do your students get to school?
Many different ways. Right now, a lot of them are carpooling because New York City public schools have yet to begin school. So they don't have busing. It's very challenging.
My gosh.
Yeah.
So you're in the city, but you're private.
hmm
Okay. So did you have background with responsive classroom?
I've never been formally trained, but I've taught in many settings where responsive classroom has been used. So I've kind of learned through all of those experiences, and I've read a lot of the materials. So we definitely draw from a lot of that here.
Have you used any of the interactive learning structures in the past?
Not any of the ones that you've used right now. I'm more early childhood focused in my background, so lots of interactive modeling. That's a lot
Yeah.
of what I've done. And the
Yeah.
morning meetings, first 6 weeks of school, and the energizers, which we are now having a lot of fun with. We're using a platform called Seesaw where you can post assignments for students online. And so my co-teacher and I actually posted one teaching them an energizer, and there's like a video of us practicing it. It's very fun.
Oh my goodness. Well, you are, Elizabeth, you are very helpful in transitioning us into the next topic, because
Great.
one of the things we're talking about is how to keep that active, energizing time of learning going too. It was great just popping in on a couple of different conversations and hearing great discussions about how to use the ones I just modeled for you as adults and use them at the level that you're doing with students, or use them in the model that you are doing with students. And I think what I hear people saying is that you really want to hang on to these practices, and at the same time, the challenges sometimes are keeping you from those practices, saying, I don't know if I can take that on yet. I'd encourage you to start really small. So start with 1 or 2 and teach those practices to be successful. Anytime you can have some interaction in your classroom that's safe and that gives kids a chance to talk with others or to communicate with others, you're going to have an increased engagement. And if you can teach it in an activity or in a morning meeting and then build that in later on as you're doing your academics, you're going to see an increase in engagement. Any lingering questions that came out of the conversations that you just had?
Margie, I have another technology question.
Yeah.
Your banner came across with the question while we were in our breakout rooms, but what I've noticed is that it doesn't stay very long. Have you been able to figure out how to get it to stay for a while, longer?
That I have not. I know that Zoom is really trying to make changes because it wasn't designed to be a child's platform to begin with. So they're trying to make some changes. So I'm not sure I have the most updated version, which might have a little bit more staying power.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. So let me share screen again, because I'm going to share with you a couple of different ideas about how you can continue to make this learning more engaging, how you can learn more about it. So as we start to teach these practices, so whether we're teaching how to do a swap meet or a think, pair, and share, or if we're teaching how to do a one-word around, one of the things we want to do is to think about what social emotional competencies students need. Sometimes it's hard to teach those right during that activity. So this is where we can also use energizers and brain breaks to teach them. So the one I did before was switch. I could talk about how, as we did that, another way we could practice is taking turns. I tell you to switch, then you do it, then you tell me to switch, and I do it. That could be a way that we could practice taking turns to get us ready to do an interactive learning structure. And regardless, energizers are important things to do to build in that body movement that kids see. I see a lot of you at the beginning when you put into the whole group chat said movement was something that was really important for you to do. No matter what age level you work with, building in that time in your classroom beyond recess. Recess is important too, but that structured time where we're all doing an activity together, teaches those social emotional skills, lowers that level of anxiety a lot of times, and builds community. So as we get a repertoire of a number of different energizers that we would do in our bunch, students would say, oh, can we take time during math right now to play the number game? And it would just give us a break. No matter what approach you're using right now, the amount of stress that you're using to teach that way and the amount of stress that students are doing to learn this way is taking more and different kind of energy. Energizers help build that sense of community and they build that break in the learning, but they can also be calming. So as we start having times where it's like, whew, we've been working really hard, we're just going to take a breather. Some of the energizers might just be some of those calming activities we do, some deep breathing that we've been practicing. And again, when we all teach it, then when a student who maybe needs to do some deep breathing, I can say, go take a break over in the break chair over there and just practice your deep breathing. Looks like you're calm and ready to join us again. Or what do we need right now to help us to be ready to learn? Let's practice 5 of our deep breaths. So they can be both. They can be energizers or energizing, and they can be calming. And then finally, they meet that need that all of us have for significance, being noticed, being important. They also meet the need of belonging, that we're part of a group, that we can all participate together. We all know that energizer. And we have a human need to have fun. So those 3 human needs, if not met in a positive, purposeful way, students will get that need met. They'll find a way to be significant. They'll find a way to belong. They'll find a way to have fun. And by putting these energizers in, we can do that in an intentional way. I'm going to teach you a couple of them, and I want to teach you a couple that you could do that you could take back and do tomorrow. And again, you don't need to jot these down because these are some that will be sent to you as well in the documents. One of them is a strategy called air writing. So air writing, and I'm going to do stop screen, but I'm going to go through the directions with you so that you see them there. The directions for air writing is I'm going to call out, in this case, a shape, but you could do a letter, a number, or a word. And I'm going to tell you to draw that shape in the air. If you're writing a letter or a number or a word, I want you to use your writing hand, your dominant hand. But for this one, we're going to do shapes. So I'm going to have you switch your hands. And by seeing the variations below, you can keep this energizer going with some different ideas. Another way to build significance is asking students for some ideas or asking them to be the lead. Or they could also be doing it in partners. So let's just try air writing. So start with your right hand and make a triangle in the air. Now make a smaller one inside. And now a smaller one inside. Now use your left hand and make a large circle. Now go backwards. Color your circle in. And then you could do fun things like pick up your circle, set your circle down, whatever you want to do, but just to get some movement in. That's all air writing is. Now, if you could think about it, there's different ways you could do that with students where they're practicing their spelling words, or practicing some numbers, or practicing drawing those landforms that I was talking about before. So ways that they can stay engaged, and it's so simple. Standing up is going to get their movement going. So even if they're doing it in a virtual screen, you can have them standing. If they're in a socially distant classroom, it could be with a partner, and maybe one can tell the other what to do and the other one can do it. Or I could practice writing one of my letters and you can guess which one I'm writing. Another one you can use is one that's just kind of a fun one that we like to do, is called Do What I Said, Not What I Say. Many of you have played Simon Says in the past, where you only move when they say Simon Says. This is similar to that. So in this case, I'm going to give you a direction. The first direction I give you, you're not going to follow. I'll give you a second direction. When I give you the second direction, you're going to follow the first direction. So do what I said, not what I say. And that pattern continues. Then I'll tell you a third direction. Do the second direction. I'm going to make this a little harder for you as you see as we do this, because when I give you the direction, I'm going to do the direction I'm saying. So you have to not do what I'm saying, you have to do what I said. You ready to be a little bit challenged? All right, stand up. Ah, good for you. Touch your shoulders. Cross your arms. Twiddle your thumbs. Sit down. Sit down. So again, that's one called do what I said, not what I say. Another way that teachers have done that is they will have, again, a student lead it, but to make the options work so that students can be successful with it, I've seen them have the directions kind of in those popsicle sticks and just can pull them out. But then the direction is always the last one that you do twice. It would have been easier if I wouldn't have been right in front of the screen. I just realized that. So to get some ideas for energizers and brain breaks, these are two of the resources that we have in our organization. The book Energizers is written for elementary, Refocus and Recharge is for middle school. Many of them are similar, but written again for the adolescent learner for the blue one. You again will get these with both the socially distance version of it and then the virtual version. And all three of these are in each of those books. So you have an idea if you want to look for where you could find these resources. We also just recently put out 10 morning meetings and 10 responsive advisory meetings for each different grade level. If you haven't had a chance to sign up for those, I just encourage people to use some of the activities in them that can also be used for energizers or brain breaks. And they've been written by educators like you that are doing this work, and they've also been written in a way that you can do safely socially distanced. I want you to think about the question that I just shared with you now. Here's the question. How might energizers and brain breaks help you to engage all students and be ready for that high level learning? And what adjustments might you need for your delivery system? Think again, what energizers and brain breaks would help you to engage all students and what adjustments might be needed? I'll give you a chance to be in another breakout room. This is going to be another breakout room of 3. And while you're in that breakout room, consider that question. What is needed in your delivery system? It was fun. I get a chance to be in one of the breakout rooms last time too. And it's a great opportunity also to talk a little bit about how you are doing these safely, if you've tried these in whatever format you're doing, or if you've got ideas to find some different ideas as well. So hopefully you have some ideas to use tomorrow or next week to build those energizers and brain breaks in, and use that time to build that community, have fun with the students, but also to teach and reflect on those social emotional competencies, because that really is the heart of so much of what we do. I mentioned before there were some resources. The morning meeting that were set out a couple of weeks ago to give you some ideas of socially distanced and virtual morning meetings and responsive advisory meetings. You can sign up for these on our website. Again, they're free resources for you. So there's 10 morning meetings and 10 advisories depending on what grade level you're at. These other resources are what we call our quick coaching guides. There are some new resources that are out there. Individually, you can purchase them to help you as you take this journey, or as school leaders, they can purchase a number of them to work with students. But lively learning and creating equity through everyday moments, replacing direct teaching with active teaching, are all designed by teachers like you to help give you some ideas of how to make your learning more engaging and empowering. And what I like about them is they're short. They're 4 pieces of paper, so you can actually plan and think about, how do I want to do this? What's a strategy I can use, and what can I do to make it work for me? Another way that you can stay connected with us is on our social media sites. So stay connected through our Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, Twitter, and Instagram. What do we like about those? If you connect with us, is it gives you an idea to share with us what you're doing as well. And I would like you to take one last minute as we wrap up the work that we're doing here, thinking about everything you learned about making students learning, engaging, empowering. What's one thing that you hope to do from here on out to increase that engagement for your students? Add that thought to our chat and look to see how those ideas can increase and work with us. It's just so, it sounds so simple, but just to have fun. Small choices, yep. Add that movement. And you know, movement doesn't have to be a big deal either. Taking time to do simple movements like I was showing you. And finding time to focus on the positive. As I look at these, we started today thinking there's the challenges of COVID and equity that we're dealing with right now. And there's also opportunities. So the opportunity that you have right now is to really be intentional and purposeful, taking the ideas that we shared today and bring them back and try using those things with your students. Take it slow, take it small, but make a couple little steps and you'll see some changes. And here's my email and our website to stay in contact. Thank you all for your time. I'm going to just stand for 5 more minutes if anyone has questions that they want to ask or additional resources. I know we don't have a lot of time during this for Q&A because of the size of the group, but happy to be here to answer your questions. If you want to put them in the chat to everyone, that can help as well. Otherwise, thank you all so much. Have a great school year. Bye, everybody.